right. So the next topic that we shall be studying for the rest of the day is hypotheses. Hypotheses are a cornerstone of quantitative research. In qualitative research, you don't have hypotheses. Why? Because you don't have a theory to begin with. In the quantitative research, you have a theory to begin with, and then you are trying to customize the theory according to your own research objective. So you see the theory with the lenses of your research objective and make it more grounded or make it more doable in the context of your own research. That is called hypothesis. So the precondition of the existence of hypothesis is that there should be some theoretical arguments. There should be some theory. Okay, multiple theory, multiple theoretical arguments, some theoretical should exist. Only then you are able to form the hypothesis. I repeat, in qualitative research, we don't have the hypothesis because we don't have the theory as a starting point. Meaning of hypothesis, it's a hypo and thesis. Hypo, as you know the word, the phrase called hypothetically, right? So it's something resembling hypothetical, which is like presumably or tentatively or imaginarily something. Thesis is a statement. So it's some tentative statement which you give before you start analyzing your data. Remember one thing, whether it's a research article or a thesis, the last part of your second chapter or second section called lit review is hypothesis. Look, when you start your thesis or research article, you start with what? Research, motivation, background, research motivation, and then towards the end of your introduction section, you make your research objectives or questions. Okay, but those could be very bombastic or very broad, or even though you have done lit review to do that to reach that stage also, but still you want to make them more grounded, more doable, more in the light of the previous studies done. Then you do the lit review, and then towards the end of the lit review section, you customize your research objectives. And when you customize them, you make them even narrower and even more, kind of doable. Like, now you can execute things. That is called hypothesis. So there should be a sync between your research objectives, lit review, and what? Hypothesis. So your hypotheses are more grounded and or more implementable statements regarding your research objectives. Okay, you will see it soon. A hypothesis is a tentative statement. Wait a second, am I even recording it? Yeah. So hypothesis is a tentative statement about the solution of a problem or the topic, whatever, based on some rationale. And what is a rationale? The rationale come from theory. Rationale come from theory before it is empirically tested. Example, let's have a look about this. For instance, this is the article which I shared with you, which I showed you before as well. I can quickly show you. Yeah, this is one I showed you in the morning. And I can show you, these are the research questions. I rather wrote my objective in the question form, which is, there's no difference really. Research questions, and then what happens? Then I filter them, then I see them through the lenses of the previous literature. And towards the end of the literature review, I have become more knowledgeable. I have become more aware of my topic, that I can form my hypothesis here. And this is the last thing I would do at the end of section 2 or chapter 2 if it is a thesis. Now, my job is to go in the research design or research methodology and analyze the data according to my hypothesis. Does it make sense? So there is a very synchronized relationship between research background, research motivation, research objectives / questions, lit review, and then making hypothesis. When you write hypothesis, basically all your thinking process is over now. Now your job is to execute. So now you're no longer a thinker. Now you are a executor. Now you're no longer a thinker. Now you'll be working on the real data, real analysis. You see my point? So now at the end of your hypothesis, you cease to be the philosopher. Now you become the executive. And what's the role of executive? Do things. And now what will you do? Do your research, actually, means methodology and data analysis and so on and so forth. Does it make sense? Okay. A quantitative research does not go in the unknown direction. As I showed you here, quantitative research is something which is not totally unknown because you have a theory to begin with. You don't know exactly the outcome, but you know the theory. You see my point? This is very important. If you know this first sentence, you know everything about hypothesis. A quantitative research does not go in the unknown direction. It means what? You know something. You don't know exactly your outcome because you haven't done the data analysis, but at least you know the possible outcomes. For instance, I often give this example to my students that when you toss a coin one time, you get head or tail, do you? So you know that the result would be either head or tail. It can't be something else. You don't know exactly the output, but you know the likely output. If you toss the coin 2 times, you have 4 outcomes. You have head and head. You have head and tail. You have tail and head. You have tail and tail. Again, the real output you don't know. So it's either one of this option or this combination or this combination or this combination. So you know that not fully okay in the real life, but at least you have some degree of precision to see the likely outcomes. When very quickly, I'll come back to you. When a company is spending on sustainability, corporate social responsibility, the company performance can either go up, it can either go down. It could be possible that the company is spending more money on corporate social responsibility. Actually, the performance is going down, or it have no effect. But there is nothing out of this box. I mean, what else can be? You see my point? So you know that out of certain, and we use the phrase in statistics called sample space. So in tossing coin 2 times, your sample space is 4 combinations. You throw the dice, you play Ludo, you have any of the 6 faces, but it can't be 9 because the maximum face is 6 and there's no 0 face. So it's 1 to 6. So you know that something will appear within these possible likelihoods only. So that is something very important for you to know, that when you are going in the quantitative research, just a sec. When you are going to do the, oh my God, what I'm doing. when you are going to do the quantitative research, okay, yeah. No. Give me a sec. Stop sharing. I don't want to take a chance because otherwise screen will not show. Yeah. So when you do the quantitative research, you are not going in absolutely unknown direction, something you know about the like. And this somewhat prediction, likely prediction, is hypothesis. And again, the best source of these predictions is the lit review. Sorry, you have a question too. Yeah.
In thesis,
Yeah.
Do I need to have hypothesis if I do quantitative research?
Absolutely mandatory. Absolutely must.
If I have the research questions, like if the hypothesis is like a presumption, like I think this will happen.
Look, if you have the research questions and you don't make the hypothesis, then the question is, then there is a question on the validity of your lit review. Why would you do the lit review if you don't want to make hype? Because the whole idea is that in the stage one, you did some lit review and you are able to form some research questions, objectives, but they're still broad. And then you do the lit review, make them, customize them according to your own thesis requirements, about your own precise literature which you are reviewing, and then make them more doable. It's like you buy some, you want to buy some bed from IKEA, and they give you different components of the bed, right? You know that in one box there are backs, in the other the legs, there are some those wheels and stuff like that. But what you do when you bring to your apartment, you see the size of the apartment. Hey, this should be the breadth and this should be the length of the bed. You can customize it. Okay, this is the window, so the bed should not be higher than this level, right? So what are you doing? Customizing them. But you went to buy the bed, you didn't buy the bread. You see my point? You have a need, you bought it. But now these technical dimensions, you will customize according to your own needs and requirements. This is called hypothesis. And why still we call it hypothesis? Because when you sleep, you might have to change the height and the other dimensions next day because maybe the results are not according to your requirements. So this is the nuts and bolts things, which we call as a hypothesis. Yeah. So coming back to your question, you asked me a very important question, and I want to re-emphasize is that if you don't have the hypothesis, then your lit review loses its legitimacy. To legitimize your lit review, you need to have the hypothesis, because otherwise, why would you do lit review in the first place?
You are an expert on the field, and you've gone through the literature and
yeah. Basically, when you have the hypothesis, you are still remaining modest, but basically you're telling to the world that, you know what, I know everything about my topic. And now my next job is to check with the data that do I really know everything. But intellectually, philosophically, you are at a point of nirvana that, you know what, I know basically what I'm doing. This much you don't know when you start the process, when you have your research questions and objectives, right? So these are, but feel free to stop me whenever you wish to. These are tentative or likely explanation of a certain phenomenon coming from the previous knowledge which come from the lit review, for sure. The question is, lit review, look, the kind of lit review you study, the kind of hypothesis you form. So this is why the quality of literature review, the age of literature review, the sources of literature review are very, very important. Okay. Often I hear from students, Shab, is it so that the literature review should not be older than 10 years? I honestly, this is one of those questions which I feel very, irritated if somebody asks me. Look, it depends upon the phenomenon. There are some classics in my field, and these boys would agree with me, that the foundation of corporate governance come from a book called Theory of Modern Day Corporates, which was published in 1932. A lot of water has flown under the bridges, but those theoretical refined pillars still exist there. So I would always ask my students that if you want to start something about this field, don't forget Berlin Means 1932. Don't forget Pharma and French in 1970s. Look, that is important. And then you see that how things, because these are the classics. These are the classics. You see the difference between the classics and the bestsellings? The bestsellings could be written last year, but the classics could be written in the 1920s, 1910. But where is the comparison? See? So therefore, it's very important that those articles, that theoretical, I would say that the literature which is theoretical, it should be based on not exclusively, but to some good extent based on some classics. But the empirical literature, it should be comparatively new. It depends upon the age of the topic also. If the topic is irrelevant, then even if you choose the article published last year, it's still irrelevant. And if the topic is still in the debate, no matter it's 20 years old, 10 years old, it's okay, no problem, it's fine. So this question, you have to decide how much deep in the history you want to go, okay? Depending upon topic, there's no one size fits all type of thing. It depends, it's very subjective. But I would say one thing is very clear, that the sources of literature review should be as credible as possible. I know we all use Wikipedia, we fail to admit it. And I would say that don't admit it. See my point? So if you are writing your master's thesis and the reference come from Wikipedia, we maybe this shows our attitude of ungratefulness, but we don't do it. So choose some well-published articles, well, high quality. I know in each field we have some top journals, some top literature review, and there are some gurus also. One very important thing of SSR, and which I like about, is that if you like some articles from on certain field, and you find that this guy has, I have taken the best 10 articles in my field, and this guy, some Matthew Anderson, has appeared in 3 of these articles. It means he's a guru, right? Try to recognize the gurus. And then in SSRN, you can go to the page of Matthew Anderson straight away, where you can have the multiple publications as well, you see? So you can read more about Matthew Anderson, his multiple articles, Some of the article may remain out of the radar. You don't check them, but when you go to his personalized page, you can see more about it. All right. So.
Instead of sort of like trying to find like persons who's like very well known in that area, you would use the very well known search engines like the ResearchGate.
Look, these are machines. I am emphasizing ResearchGate. I think I gave you the reference of ResearchGate in the morning, but I'm also in favor of this thing, that in each field there are some gurus. And remember, you use ResearchGate and you pick all other people except the gurus. because you trusted engine more than the guru himself.
Like situation that, okay, you use like ResearchGate with those specific keywords that you have selected, and then like relying on the research engine, the ResearchGate, instead of like trying to figure out that who are the gurus. Because
No, I think you misunderstood me. I think you misunderstood me. Your first point of search should always be your keywords. But when you have used the keywords multiple times, you definitely would see that, you know what, these are 3 or 4 people in my field who are searching, who are appearing more often than others. And then you might be interested in knowing more about those gurus. Then you go to their personalized pages. But starting point should always, because how would you know that who are the gurus in your field unless you have done the keyword search? You would never, unless somebody tells you. But first of all, you do by the keywords, see some people, and it's not necessary. It's not, maybe in the entire process, you never come across gurus. See, you always go with the keywords, fine, no problem. But if you happen to find some people, some big names, look, why are they big names? Because they are published in top journals. That's why they're big names. So basically, when you take, when your denominator is the person, the big person, you're also searching for the high quality research by default. Either way, it works. But of course, the starting point should always be the keywords. Only then you know who are the gurus. Otherwise, we would never know. What if the literature review, not only in the qualitative, oh, am I hiding myself? Maybe I do like this. I can't see these boys. Maybe this is better, no? I didn't realize it. Weird. Where were we? Yeah. As I said before, that in the qualitative research, you don't have the theories, right? Proper established theories. You might come across this problem in the quantitative research as well, that you don't have the proper direct literature available. That then we borrow from the other disciplines, like for example, interdisciplinary research is very important. Many of my articles, I borrowed theories from the field of economics and political science, even sociology. I do a lot of work on the board of directors, that what type of people they are. Hence, I take into account some of their sociological characteristics. So I do use some sociology theories. Sometimes either you don't have, or you don't find the relevant theory in your own field. In that case, it's absolutely acceptable, rather appreciated, if you can also get some theoretical underpinnings from the other relevant literature. Like, for example, in my field, in finance and governance, I use a lot of accounting, economics, law, philosophy, sociology theories. Perfectly fine. I remember one thesis by this this article about this. I have one publication and I mentioned it. It's about how the stock market in the US reacts when the Republicans or Democrats are elected. Does stock market go up when Democrats are elected or whether Republicans are? The stereotype is that the Republicans are more pro-capitalism, and when they come in power, the stock prices go up. The other stereotype is that Democrats are more like a kind of left, not the typical left, but they are like social democrats. And when they come in power, the stock market goes down. And here, the problem with my student was that we were not able to find proper theories in finance. And then what we did, we find a theory from typical political science subject courses, and then we try to apply it. But we proved it wrong. It's not the case. The stock market reacts even more positively in some circumstances when the Democrats are elected, and the Republicans goes down. Yeah. The quantitative research aim to verify the hypothesis and not to find out the solution. So basically, maybe that is the one reason that why in the universities of applied sciences, qualitative research is more in fashion than quantitative research, because here, the ultimate philosophy of the quantitative research is not to solve a problem, but to confirm that is your data and the analysis is in conformity with the existing theories or not. But then you can make it problem-centric by choosing the right type of literature and forming your hypothesis accordingly. Whereas in the qualitative research, you start with the problem, well-defined problem, and you are trying to solve it through your research. For example, you have employed a new management information system. How well it is working? Okay, then you interview your colleagues, some superiors. You see some technical configuration of your system as well. You compare it with the previous system, and thus you are able to make some kind of conclusion based on that, or solve the problem. Whereas here, there's no such thing. You're not solving the problem for one company, because in the quantitative data, you are taking multiple companies. So you are more discussing a phenomenon than solving the problem of a particular company. Mm-hmm.
Is it possible that you still do like quantitative research?
Of course.
Even though you do like case study?
Of course.
Just to like,
yeah,
manage it like.
Definitely. These boys, they have done, and we do every year, a project with Utrecht University of Applied Sciences, whereby we take some case companies that they should be merged, or the one company should take over the other. So these are the case companies, and there we apply typical quantitative research. So it's possible that even in the case companies, you can apply, in the case studies, I mean, you can apply the quantitative research. Yeah, it's definitely possible. People do it. Yeah. The hypothesis should have three things. Not should have, but must have three things. You should be having the variables. And I think we discussed what variables are. Variables are proxies, right? Because if you don't have the variables or proxies, what would you do in your third chapter when you go to the research methodology? What would you measure? Right? So it's very, like, for example, I can show you here. Okay, let me show you here. Maybe. We have it. Well, I can take any of them. They all are same. It says firm level. Maybe I zoom in a bit. Firm level capital structure influences investments. Firm level capital structure influences investments. It means that the variable here is the capital structure. Well, you're not a student of finance. Capital structure means the company's financing, where the money comes from. And does the financing make an impact on investment? So now it means that I have two variables here to talk about. The one is the company's financing data, and then the other is company's investment data. So I have two variables here. Next one. The firm level capital structure influences firm performance. Now what I have, an additional variable, firm's performance, which I can measure in multiple ways, no problem, nothing stops me. Now I can go back to the morning example, that production, revenue, the profitability growth rate, the stock market, anything. I can take multiple, and I can pick up the one proxy which fits the most. This is the best fit. And same way, what was the board of directors characteristics. impact the capital structure. So the board of director characteristics, because I said before that I do a lot of research about the kind of board of directors we have. What are the characteristics of the board of directors? Well, how educated they are, how well connected they are, how qualified they are. Is the board independent? And these, so I can have the multiple. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you read the hypothesis of any research, one thing should come in front of your eyes: the variables or the proxies. If not, then you're missing the bus. So it should not be a vague statement. It shouldn't be a philosophical statement. It should be telling you very clearly, hey, this causes this, or this is affected by this, or this is related to this. The second thing is the population. Population. What do you mean by a population?
A whole bunch of observation.
The whole bunch of
Observation.
So basically,
All existing observations, let's say.
do you mean the population, the strictly meaning of population? No. Mhm. You asked me a very important question, and this is what Daniil has said. You said that there are 19 sectors. I will not go too much about your research. There are some 19 subsamples. Some of them may have tens of thousands of people. Some of them may be having just 100. And then I said that to make a statistical study valid, we need minimum 100. Look, in one case, the size of the population is maybe tens of thousand people. And then you take a sample from them. So see the difference? There's a population sample. But in some cases, it could be possible your sample is also equal to the population. I mean, it's possible. Yeah. So when you write the hypothesis, they should underline the population also. And look at this hypothesis. It says board of directors characteristics impact capital structure. Did I write that board of directors characteristics impact capital structure of the sample companies? No, I'm highlighting a phenomenon. I'm talking about the entire population, because what is my approach? My approach is deductive reasoning. I want to move from general to specific. But before I enter specific, I need to talk about the whole population. And then when I move to the next chapter, methodology, then I will take my sample data. So basically, it should highlight the entire population, even though you are studying a sample. But of course, you can't study the whole thing. You see, sample, remember one thing, sample is not a limitation. Taking a sample, not a population, is not a limitation. Sometimes you have no choice. Even if you can take population data, but you prefer to choose sample data, not the population data. You know why? Just tell me one thing. When you are a medical, you are a nurse, and you call a patient, come tomorrow 8 o'clock with fasting. I want to take your blood sample. Do you use the word blood sample or blood population? Even though you can extract the entire blood of the body. But then the problem is that the person would die. It's not that the whole blood is not available. Well, you can. If you are a very bad doctor, you want to take some revenge, you can take. But the point here is that the blood sample, because few drops, they would say everything about your, that would be enough to diagnose the problem and see where the issue is. So even though the population is available, we prefer sample. Well, that's a different thing. That's a different thing, but it's still not so bad if you take the whole population, the whole blood from the body. And then you also lose the sample, and then you also mix up with something else. And the third thing is that the relationship between the variables should be visible. And here, the relationship is visible. The board of directors characteristics impact capital structure. So this hypothesis is fulfilling three criteria. There are variables, yes. Number two, they are underlining the population. And third, there is a relationship between the variables. All right. Good job. Remember, don't feel the pressure to prove the hypothesis. I think we discussed in the morning that when you prove something, this is a research contribution, but when you disprove something, even that is a research contribution. So the three possibilities: you prove something, you disprove something, or you are unable to say anything. All these three possibilities are, like for example, the popular belief is that more educated people live in a city, less is the crime rate. Well, this can be proved true. If your results are like this, it can also be the opposite. Or it can be so that you don't have enough, your statistical tools are not in a position to make some conclusion. So we are modest people, we don't feel any pressure to prove or disprove something. So all three likelihoods are your research contribution. No, never feel the pressure that no, I have to prove something. I know some students I met in the past, they were frustrated. Shab, we are doing this data. Nothing is proved. Hey, even that is a finding. You have proved something that the relationship between these two variables is very blurry. So don't don't ride on the bandwagon of proving something. It's fine, no problem. We are researchers. We're not some preachers that we have to show something or we have to, prove. So we are very objective, scientific. If we are unable to prove something, have your head high and say it clear that no, we don't have the evidence to prove something. Good job, fantastic article. It's fine. Good question. Good. It depends upon your research objectives. And I would say that don't have more than 4 research questions or objectives. Please don't have.
Hypotheses.
Yeah, well, depending upon the question, you have the hypothesis.
I think you would recommend that you have like one main research questions and maybe 1 or 2 sub questions.
Yeah. So basically the same thing, that if these questions are related, that is why you have the sub question. Because why you have sub questions? Because they are emanating, they are sprouting from the main research question. Okay, so if you have some related research questions or hypotheses, even if you showed them separately, standalone, but they are a bunch of related objectives or questions, so that's 3 or 4 basically. I mean, if I count 1 plus 2, 3, so 3 or 4. More than 4 can be many for a thesis. I did my PhD with 3 objectives. Absolutely 3 objectives. Yep. All good? Like this is an example, actually. I was reading lots of literature, and almost overwhelming majority of the literature was saying that firms which have more independent board of directors, they give the better financial performance. Because that independent means they're not biased. They speak truth. They call spade a spade. Because many times in the company board of directors, there are 2 groups of people, right? The one is the executives and the other are the non-executive or independent, right? Executives, they're always been scared of speaking the truth. You know the reason why? Imagine you are a senior accountant of the company, and you're giving a you're giving a presentation to the board of directors where you have the CEO and CFO and other top board of director. And you end up saying, yeah, you know what, our company's financial performance at this moment is, or you say that the company's future is absolutely pathetic. No matter how truth you're speaking, you're taking a big risk. You remember those philosophers who were killed because they spoke truth? You see my point? You have a lot to lose. So many times, and this is a governance problem with the company, that many times executive they keep the blind eye because nobody's speaking. It's like emperor's new clothes. We all know that the emperor is walking naked, but nobody has the guts and courage to say the truth because they know that if they speak the truth, then it can be risk of being eliminated. But the independent directors are the people who are on the board of directors, but they're not the executive. They're more like advisor consultants, and they have less stakes. At the moment you say, you know what, we don't need you anymore. Okay, no problem. I have no shortage of see, the stakes are less. They speak more truth, or they are expected to speak more truth.
The inference. So what is the recommendation how you can get over that problem?
Usually these independent directors are people who have decades and decades of past experience. And when they speak truth, when they point out the problem in a very bold way, as they're expected to, they also give the solution to that because they have very huge past experiences. It may not be very relevant or very applicable experience, but at least they can guide you. They're more like guides. They're not always right, but at least they can't hide. They can't turn the face when they see the problem. But the problem with the executive is that they are paid very well. The salary is huge, and if they speak truth, then there's a risk of losing the job. And no such risk, or comparatively lesser such risk, exists for the non-executive directors. But anyway, without going too much into the topic per se, my idea is that when I was doing this research, and I found that an overwhelming result, empirical studies are saying that companies with the more board of directors, independent board of directors, give the better financial performance because of this honesty and truthfulness. But until I took a sample of the growth companies, the tech companies, and what I found that in the tech companies, more independent directors are associated with a lower performance of the company. And then the reasoning was that because when you show the results, you again can't wash off your hands. You have to give the reason that why your results possibly fit with the hypothesis or why they don't fit. So remember that in the research, reasoning is very important. You prove something, give the reasoning. You're not able to prove something, give the reasoning. So why it was opposite? Because I found that in the tech companies, the IT, biotech, media, it's not independent, which is that important. But the knowledge, skill is more important. Imagine they're a tech company and they're developing some software, okay? And they have independent board of directors. And most of the independent board of directors, their background is, how to say, maybe hotel industry, or maybe they have been chef in the past, or maybe travel and tourism. They can point out some anomalies going on in the company, but they can't provide the solution. Because your company's main revenue is coming from the software development. They can't really contribute to the main, the main business line. You see my point? So therefore, in such companies, more than the independence, the know-how, the knowledge of the independent director is more important. So the board of directors should be having more intellectual capital rather than the independence. But anyway, so I could able to develop a gap in the theory. Theory was saying more independent, better performance. But now I can say that more independent, better performance is still valid, but there is an exception. And the exception is the tech companies. In the tech companies, education of board of directors, experience of board of directors is more important than just being independent. Because then they attend the board meetings. If I have a chef background, I've been a chef in the past, I have been a hotelier in the past, and now in the board of directors, people are talking about algorithm. People are talking about those symbols and notations, which I don't understand. What is my contribution? What would I do? All I would do, hey, let's take a break. I make some chicken tikka masala for you. That's the only contribution I can do. Sarcastic. So see, so that it means that I'm just a dummy sitting there doing nothing. And when the others realize that he's a dummy, he knows nothing about the company, they can do anything to fool me, right? And remember, one of my jobs of being an outside director is also to check that are these guys behaving properly. Hey, I can't even monitor what they're doing because I don't have the necessary skill and knowledge to watch them. At least some education I should have about the IT industry. So therefore, I found out that, it doesn't work. It works in the normal, it works in the furniture making company, it works in the construction industry, it works in the petroleum industry, but in the growth companies, in the tech companies, it doesn't work. Because these are two knowledge intensive industries. So therefore, and now I made a contribution to I didn't create a theory, remember, theory was existing. But I pointed out towards the modification of the theory that, theory exists, nothing is wrong, but we should also say that subject to the fact that the companies are tech companies, then this theory needs some more, modifications. Right. Read this. Maybe you'll find some ideas about the difference between assumptions, postulate, and hypothesis. Because this is so simple that I think you can do by yourself. But I would help you in case you don't, if you're not able to do it. And I can actually, so the idea is that assumptions are like hearsay or your perceptions. Like, for example, companies in Finland are more honest than their counterparts in the US. It's based on a national characteristic that Finland is a corruption-free country, transparency. We hardly see any corporate scandals, whereas this is a very often seen in many parts of the world. So our starting point of interaction when we meet is that, hey, you come from Finland. Oh, it's a very honest country. You see my point? So it's an assumption. Why I call it assumption? Because it's not always true. You see, it's subject to empirical test. Even though hypotheses are also subject to empirical test, but the hypotheses are formed based on some empirical test done in the past. Assumption is just an assumption. Okay. And postulate is more about, you can talk about postulates in finance or in quantitative research when you don't want to talk about who is cause and who is effect. So if I say board independence and firm performance are associated, but you never know, is it the board independence which affect the performance of the company, or is it the performance of the company affecting the board independence? We don't know the cause and effect relationship. You see my point? So when we talk about this kind of non-directional thing, then we may talk about postulates. But when we talk about the hypothesis, we have done a lot of filtration, if not flirtation, through the literature review. And then we have made our objectives more grounded. And usually they talk about cause and effect thing. Yeah, one is cause, the other is, very often they are talking about cause and effect. I show you. If you notice here, the board of directors characteristics impact firm performance. You see my point? You can see that there's a one arrow coming from the cause and going towards the effect. So in another characteristic of hypothesis is that not always, I must give a disclaimer, not always, but very often, they also talk about the cause and effect relationship. So we know where the arrow starts and where it goes to. In the postulates, there is no such cause and effect relationship. Sorry, did you raise hand or something?
Just an example.
Okay.
Like price is associated with demand.
Yeah. The nature of hypothesis. Well, I think we discussed a lot. Let's move on. Simple hypothesis. The simple hypothesis is that, remember, when you talk about, I think this part is important, then things will become very free-flowing. And I know that 4 o'clock is, the time is ticking away, and I will try not to keep you for a long time. If I say y is a function of x, it means that x is affecting y. Y is a dependent variable, yeah, and x is the independent variable. So I can say that sales of the company depends upon the advertisement they do. So when I take, look, your dependent variable would always be 1, but your independent variable can be 1 or more. You see my point? But when you have exactly one independent variable, this is called simple hypothesis, and this is dependent variable. But let's say I say that the sales of the company, depending upon the advertisement plus what else I should take? Advertisement and innovation of the company. How many variables I have now? 2. This is not called simple hypothesis. This is called complex hypothesis or compound hypothesis. If I have more than 1, remember that dependent would always be 1, but independence can be multiple, right? So yeah, because you can't do multiple impacts. You can only study one impact at a time, yeah? Okay. Sorry. Yeah. The complex hypothesis, when we have more, for example, children with urban background outperform their classmates with a rural background in studies given that the parents are coming from the working background. You see my point? So this is a complex hypothesis. If I say children with the urban background outperform the classmates with so I can say that the students' marks, depending upon the origin they come from, then it's a simple hypothesis. But if I say that not only the origin they come from, but also what type of, whether the parents are working or they come from the business family. So then I have more than one independent variable. So then it becomes a complex hypothesis. Third is directional hypothesis. I think I discussed it. When we show some causal, yeah, direction means who's the cause, who's the effect, yeah, and non-directional, there's no cause, and if there is a relationship, but there's no real cause and effect things. We don't know. We're not able, like, for example, if I say the sales of the company, the advertisement impact the sales? It's a causal hypothesis. Next question. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from the literature review. Most of the studies are saying that it is the advertisement who causes change in the sales. Am I right? But imagine you have done very extensive literature review. And in some studies, they say that it's the advertisement which have an impact on the sale, but sometimes your previous sales level allow you to how much you can spend on the advertisement. Look, if a company's sales revenue is very poor, I mean, you have a hand-to-mouth situation. How would you make advertisement? On the other hand, if a company is really flourishing in terms of sales revenue, they can afford all type of advertisement channels. So you may disagree with me, but sometimes you are unable to establish the cause and effect relationship. Then we are not able to develop the causal. In that case, we have this non-directional. Sometimes it affects this, that, sometimes this, that, this way.
The literature is giving contradictory data for the hypothesis.
What do you mean?
Like, let's say that there is no specific information for my subject, but there is relevant, let's say, global information on global scale, but not specifically in Finland. But the data that I get from the global level are contradictory.
Good question. Tell me one thing.
How do I draw the hypothesis?
You will find the answer by yourself now.
Okay, thank you.
When you read this thing, what type of relationship you see between the dependent variable and the independent variables? If I say that performance means the marks of the student. Marks of the students depend upon the residence background of the student, plus if parents are working parents. Can you see that your dependent variable is 1, but your independent variables are 2? Do you agree with me? Okay, let's go step by step, then things will be clear. Is it saying, and listen very carefully, is it saying that if you have the rural, if you have the urban background, the performance of the student is better? Is it saying this? No, Daniil, look at this. Children with the urban background outperform.
Yeah, okay, this way.
So it says that if you come from the urban background, you perform better in studies. And if you come from the rural background, you perform bad in studies. Is your hypothesis taking sides? Can I say that more urban, better performance? Did I say that more urban, bad performance? Poor, did I say this thing? So, but see, now you have taken sides that more urban, more better performance. It's not only directional, but it's one-way directional. You are studying if higher urban background of the student is associated with his better performance. Look at this hypothesis. If you want, I can zoom in. Sorry. Sorry, just a sec. Look at this hypothesis. Maybe this one, even though it's fine, but the firm level capital structure influences investment. Compare it with the previous example that more urban background leads to better performance. And compare with this. Both are directional. Look at the previous one. Urban background, the background of the student leads to the performance in the grades. Capital structure have an impact on investment.
Knowledge that you get from the literature, it either support the hypothesis or does not support the hypothesis. But if the data is more or less
which data? You are yet to analyze the data. You haven't analyzed your data yet.
I think the information that I've got from the literature.
Yeah.
If it's weaker or stronger.
Yeah. If you let me complete, maybe things will be better. Maybe this researcher, when he or she was studying this phenomenon, they got pretty much overwhelming information in the literature that, you know what, most of the studies are, I don't know any percentage, what is meant by most, but an overwhelming majority of the literature which you reviewed is saying that more urban background you have, better impact on your class performance, it reflects. But when I was studying this study, when I was doing this study, I found that definitely capital structure have an impact on the firm performance investment, but sometimes this capital structure have a positive impact, and sometimes this capital structure has a negative impact also. But it affects. So either way, it affects favorably sometimes, it affects unfavorably sometimes, but it does affect. Then I can't take sides. Then I play safe, and rather than making a big claim that it is good impact or a bad impact, I say, hey, it impacts. This depends upon how categorical the literature is. Right? And this thing we also show in the data analysis when we do a 2-test ANOVA and 1-test ANOVA. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you see this object, I think this is a very good example. When you see this highlighted hypothesis, and when you see this highlighted hypothesis, do you agree with me that it's a directional hypothesis? Something leads to something. But here, I go a step forward and say, you know what, this leads to that favorably or in this direction. But here, I'm saying that this leads to that, but I don't take the sides of direction, which way. But at the same time, I'm not saying that they are not related. I'm saying they are one is impacting other. But here, in case of please bear with me a few minutes. Use of new drug. We experiment on some patients. Obviously, the manufacturer's claim would be that the drug affect positively. Otherwise, why would you launch a drug which has negative impact? Have you ever heard a claim by GlaxoSmithKline? We are launching a new cream, you apply and you all would look 30 years older than before. Do we do? Because the claim of is only one-sided. But then we observe the data when we do the analysis, or we study the similar studies in the past. And we find that sometimes certain drugs can backfire on the patients, and patients feel worse off than before. Not better off, but worse off than before. But if your overwhelming literature is saying that, you know what, this drug, the records show it always affects positively, then you can have a hypothesis that, you know, it works. Otherwise, you can say that, for example, amount of calories have a negative impact on heart, because most of the studies have shown, literature, that it shows a negative impact. More calories we consume, our heart gets weaker because it has to work hard. The other hypothesis is that sometimes it works, sometimes calories are good for heart, it makes you functional, and sometimes, I say, higher amount of calories or amount of calories impact heart's health. It's a two-way. It can be good, it can be bad. You see my point? So this is how we define our hypothesis. So hypotheses generally are directional, but are you two directional like this, or are you only one directional? It depends upon the overwhelming study literature. And again, I don't have any percentage, what percentage? It depends upon the choice of your. So see, everything is clear. What type of literature you study? Literature must be not compromising the quality of literature, and so on and so forth. So this is all something which you have to see and experience. Make sense? So sometimes, as I said, literature, directional, literature, hypothesis, in my opinion, the hypothesis should be directional, but sometimes we can't. After directional, the next question is it two directional or is it one directional? So that's everything for today. And we have covered two very important theoretical bases. And now when we meet next time, we start our day with the SPSS. And then everything so next time when we meet, I would still be doing the slides, but then at the same time, we'll be using the SPSS workspace as well. So technically, we are done for the day. If you have any questions, but thank you so much for being so patient and I like the way you are participating in the discussion. That's very essential part of the course. Thank you so much. And once I get my recordings, I would be sharing it with you.